As president, Donald Trump once again hikes tariffs around the world, including here in Canada. Now a 35% tariff on all non-CUSMA compliant goods. We are in intensive negotiations with the Americans, and in parallel, preparing reprisals if those negotiations do not succeed. I told the Prime Minister, do not roll over. Hit that guy back as hard as we possibly can. Baby strollers, spray deodorant, fire extinguishers and furniture. All of these items are now going to be more expensive to import into the United States. National debt is now at a record $37 trillion. That's according to the latest Treasury Department report. The probability of recession in the United States has gone up significantly. Can you believe it if I told you that the wealthiest country in the world is being shackled by colossal debt, so immense it could shake the very foundations of the trade empire they have spent decades building? Meanwhile, right next door, their closest neighbor just claimed a new crown on August 21st. In the brief span between August 20th and 25th, the U.S. Department of the Treasury officially released a staggering figure. The United States national debt has surpassed $37 trillion, a record never before seen in history. National debt is now at a record $37 trillion. That's according to the latest Treasury Department report. Rather than weakening Canada as originally intended, Washington's wave of tariffs has backfired, triggering a reshaping of North American trade that few had foreseen. Economic analysts are calling it a perfect storm. The United States is now grappling with inflation, soaring public debt, and a year-over-year increase that remains at 6.4%. The tariff war was expected to deliver a heavy blow to Canada, but in reality, it has inadvertently reinforced Ottawa's growing influence. This is no longer about a handful of individual sectors. It is the entire regional trade system that is being disrupted, noted Professor Laura Klein of Georgetown University. This summer, President Trump reinstated tariffs of 35% on Canadian imports, framing it as a show of strength. Washington cited concerns over fentanyl smuggling, along with Ottawa's recognition of Palestine. But those explanations only underscore the steadily rising tensions between the two neighbors. The fentanyl coming through Canada is massive. We don't want that crap in our country. We gotta stop it. I would have stopped it. In reality, Washington's tariff policy is nothing short of a ticking time bomb. The first to bear the brunt are households. My grocery bill has gone up nearly 18% since June. Milk, bread, even a box of cereal costs more, while my pay has increased, lamented Sarah Martinez, a teacher in Ohio. A recent Morning Consult survey found that 68% of American families now see food and utility expenses as their greatest financial burden. Businesses are also raising alarms. In its latest report, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce estimated that tariffs have added an average of about $1,200 in cost per year for every household. While many manufacturers now face shortages of steel, auto parts, or electronic components that once flowed easily across the border, this is clearly a case of shooting ourselves in the foot, said Thomas Reynolds, director of an auto parts company in Michigan, noting that many major clients have already shifted production lines to Ontario. To avoid tariffs alongside tariffs comes the crushing weight of inflation and debt. U.S. public debt has now surpassed $37 trillion, equal to 141% of GDP, the highest level since the Second World War. Interest payments alone are projected to hit $1.2 trillion in 2025, more than the defense budget. This level of spending is unsustainable, admitted Senator Lisa Murkowski, stressing that every dollar spent on interest means one less dollar for infrastructure, healthcare, or energy security. These macro figures quickly translate into everyday pressure. Gasoline prices have climbed to $5.20 per gallon. Rental rates in major cities are up more than 11% year over year, while credit card debt has reached its highest level. Since 2009, according to Federal Reserve data. This isn't just a recession. It's a squeeze on household income, said Mark Dwyer, a laid-off retail worker in Pennsylvania. We're paying more, getting less, and nobody in Washington seems to care. If Washington thought Ottawa would stand still, reality has proven otherwise. Earlier this month, Prime Minister Mark Carney declared that Canada would not negotiate. Under pressure, he affirmed that the country is charting a long-term strategy, backed by strong financial reserves and booming resource exports. Rather than retreating, Canada has turned tariffs into a driver for diversification. Within 12 months, the share of exports going to U.S. has fallen from 78% to 68% according to statistics. Canada goods that once flowed through Detroit or Buffalo are now being redirected to Vancouver, Prince Rupert, and Halifax. Nor does it stop there. Mexico has emerged as a pivotal partner. A string of high-level visits by Canadian ministers has secured joint infrastructure projects worth billions of dollars, ranging from upgrading Mexico's cross-country railways to developing renewable power grids. Backing this cooperation is Maple 8, the alliance of Canadian pension funds, controlling over $2 trillion in assets, which is investing heavily in projects stretching from Veracruz to Baja California. This is not a short-term patch. We are building supply chains resilient to any shocks from Washington, affirmed Mexico's Deputy Trade Minister Carla Ramirez. Meanwhile, energy remains the trump card. The U.S. currently imports more than 3.5 million barrels of crude oil per day from Canada, a supply not easily replaced. American refineries are designed to process Canadian crude, making alternatives virtually impossible. Energy is our silent ace, explained Rachel Singh, an analyst at RBC Capital Markets. Revenues from Canada's oil and gas exports hit 160 billion Canadian dollars in just the first half of 2025. A new record. This windfall is being reinvested into both fossil fuels and renewables, strengthening Ottawa's leverage. By contrast, U.S. energy companies are struggling with high costs, stalled permits, and weakening industrial demand. We've been forced to cut 12% of our workforce, admitted James Holloway, director of a Texas refinery. As the tariff war drags on, Canada's advantages grow clearer. Ford has announced a $2.1 billion expansion of its Ontario plant, capitalizing on stable tax policies and access to global trade agreements. The tech sector is following suit. Amazon Web Services is building a $1.8 billion data center hub in Montreal as a safeguard against southern instability. At the same time, Canadian railways are reporting double-digit growth in high freight, much of it previously routed through U.S. corridors. This is no longer a temporary disruption, asserted Robert Lighthizer, former U.S. trade representative. In an interview with Bloomberg, Canada is becoming the hub. While the U.S. risks being sidelined politically, the shock waves are just as severe. A trade policy once touted as a symbol of strength has become a burden. Approval of the U.S. government's handling of trade has dropped to just 32% according to Pew. Meanwhile, in Canada, Carney's approval rating has soared to 61%, an unprecedented figure for a prime minister. In 2 decades, the balance of power has flipped, observed Angela Brooks, an expert with the Council on Foreign Relations. The U.S. used to set the rules, but now Canada is in the driver's seat. Indeed, in less than a year, the North American trade map has been redrawn. U.S. debt has ballooned to $37 trillion. Tariffs have backfired. Inflation is eroding purchasing power, while Canada is strengthening ties with Mexico. Expanding energy exports and attracting U.S. corporations. The lingering question: what will Washington do? Keep fighting to reclaim its leadership, or accept that a new order has been established, with Canada at the helm? And if such dramatic shifts can unfold in just 12 months, one can only imagine what surprises the next year may bring. What do you think of the current trade policy? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more updates. Whatever they tariff us other countries, we will tariff them. That's reciprocal back and forth. A lot of the items that we all own contain a lot of steel and aluminum. This is going to impact everything. Tariffs tend to reduce entry by foreign companies. They don't find it's gonna. They're not gonna have enough of a market. People are struggling right now. Prices are, high as it is, it's difficult to get a job. Cost of housing is high. The United States once believed tariffs would revive factories that had long been a source of pride. Yet, with a single decree, they lost not only steel and whiskey, but also their closest ally. On February 1st, President Donald Trump rattled global markets by signing an order to double tariffs on imported steel and aluminium, raising them from 25% to 50%. Speaking before cheering steel workers in Pennsylvania, he declared, "We are bringing jobs back home." The White House called it an act of patriotism, a bid to restore a core industry. But what was billed as a return of Rust Belt pride instead became the opening shot of a drawn-out trade war, one that spread from smelters to supermarkets and into the cultural fabric of North America. Industries once thought unrelated began to feel the strain. Soaring glass prices pushed Napa wineries and small distilleries reliant on the Canadian market into hardship. We were all already struggling with slowing domestic demand. And now, production costs are ballooning because of tariffs, admitted Sarah Whitman, a vineyard director. For them, the trade war was no longer an abstract political concept, but a threat to survival. Canada, the United States' largest supplier of aluminum, and its closest partner, struck back hard. On March 13th, 2025 Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced a $29.8 billion Canadian dollars, $21 billion US dollars retaliation package, tariffs of 25% targeted steel, aluminium, and a host of U.S. consumer goods, from tractors to household appliances. This is not reckless escalation. It is a way to protect Canadian jobs, declared Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland. Almost overnight, cross-border supply chains that had held firm for decades began to unravel in a single night. Contract with Canadian partners became worthless and cost doubled, said John Walker, a logistics executive in Michigan. On the other side of the border, Canadian firms were reeling too. Marco DeLuca, head of a construction project in Windsor, said his road and bridge budget had ballooned by $30 million because of surging steel costs. It's as if a vital trade artery has been severed. The biggest shock came in April, when Canada opened the liquor front. Provincial liquor boards quietly instructed supermarkets to pull American bourbon and wine from shelves. Torontonians accustomed to rows of Kentucky bourbon suddenly saw empty shelves, replaced by Scotch, Chilean and French vintages, and local labels. At first, I thought it was a shipping error. Then I realized it was politics in my shopping cart. Said customer Amanda Lee, the symbolic blow was heavy. Bourbon is not just a drink, but an American cultural heritage, a $9 billion industry, supporting more than 200,000 jobs. Distillers are being sacrificed, fumed Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. His fears were well-founded. U.S. whiskey exports to Canada dropped 62% in the first half of 2025, while wine sales plunged 67%. LCBO, Canada's largest liquor retailer, reported that nearly $700 million worth of U.S. alcohol sales in 2024 had evaporated within months. Canada is not just a market. It is our biggest market, warned the CEO of Brown-Forman. If brands like Jack Daniels disappear from shelves too long, consumers will adapt and never return. Toronto bar owner Johnny Rafferty agreed. We used to order bourbon by the barrel. Now we only sell it by the glass. Drinkers have switched to Canadian whiskey or Scotch, and once habits change, they rarely reverse. In the United States, political backlash exploded. Lawmakers from both parties blasted the White House for policies hurting the very industrial states they were meant to protect. Even Trump's own ambassador to Ottawa Pete Hoekstra admitted Canadians were deeply upset and not easy to deal with. Steel unions in Pittsburgh cried foul. We were promised jobs. But tariffs drove Canada to cancel orders. Now ships are cut and workers are out of work. Lamented steel worker Tom Rivera. The numbers speak for themselves. By August 2025, U.S. steel exports to Canada had fallen 45%, costing billions